Okay.
Is it Parker? Bill Parker?
No.
Yeah.
It's not plural though.
Oh, it's Eagle.
Eagle, sorry.
Sure.
Bloody visible.
Yeah.
And then there should be another one that pops up. There you go. Now it's, why is that? Yeah, try that with the SVQ, and then that.
Donors choose.
All right, good morning. We're talking this morning about becoming a connected educator, and I've looked over my description, and I'm going to try really hard to talk about what I promised to talk about while getting into everything else that's been really exciting to me since I wrote that description. Okay. First of all, just a little about me. I'm a writer, teacher, learner, and poet. I teach 9th grade English. Come on in, there's at least a seat back there. I teach 9th grade English at Kahila Jewish High School, which has 155 students total. It's in Palo Alto, and it's much bigger than it was when I joined that school 6 years ago when they only had 99 kids. This gives me a lot of freedom to innovate, and when I mess things up, I only get a small group of people mad, so it's really good for trying out new technologies, right? I blog, I tweet, I model connected learning. Once I finished my dissertation a year and a half ago, I said, wow, I'm used to having some sort of giant obsessive project in my life. What will I do? And then I said, oh, I can figure out this whole connected ed thing. And you know, a lot of what we're going to talk about today has been, you know, different parts of that process for me, while also trying to give you some ideas where you can have access to it. Because there's a lot of different ways that you can participate in the connected learner community, and you don't have to be a super expert in just about anything, which was really refreshing to me. How many people here blog? Awesome. Once I came to teaching through writing. And one of the reasons I work at a small private school is instead of going through a teacher credential program, I went to an MFA program for poetry and then found a national writing project and then met some teachers and they said, you should teach at this school. And I said, great, I need a job. And it's been amazing, but only in the past year have I been blogging, despite the fact that I really believe in writing and I know it's completely transformative to everything in life. Because writing is also very hard, and sharing your writing is very hard, and there's a lot of ego and risk involved in, you know, well, what if I look stupid? And then I realized I'm a teacher, I look stupid every day. And then I found connected teachers on Twitter who let me know that looking stupid is called modeling the process and giving our students permission to fail, because a failure is a first attempt in learning. Like, all of these catchphrases are thanks to Twitter. I mean, maybe Twitter is an amazing professional development resource, or maybe it's just a giant enabling community. Either way, I'm good with it, right? Because sometimes I need that. So I started blogging about my attempt to integrate tech in my classroom, thinking that since I'm trying out all these things, even if they're not working, I should really let somebody know so they don't try it, because we only have so much time. So my primary blog is mypaperlessclassroom.org, and I try to keep that focused mainly on things I'm doing to integrate tech into my English class, because just like flying cars, they promise us paperless classrooms, and I'd really like to see it happen. But I've got some pretty high pedagogical expectations. Like, there's really important stuff that I want to be happening when my students are doing writing. And if I'm going to use a tech tool in my class, it has to serve my pedagogical needs. And one of the things I really try to do with the work that I do as a connected educator is making sure that I'm putting that pedagogy first. There's a lot of really neat toys and tools out there that you can use, that frankly take a lot of time to learn. So if I'm going to figure out how to use one, I really want to make sure it does something that I actually need it to do. And that's kind of like one of my guiding principles. The great thing about this is it allows me to reflect on how I'm integrating tech and to share that with other people, and then occasionally somebody even responds and says, oh yeah, me too, or you know what'll solve that problem is if you do X or Y. And then it's amazing because, oh my goodness, somebody actually read what I wrote. So then not only am I getting the pedagogical benefit of writing about my teaching experience, but I actually get some community interaction there. As a writing teacher, I tell kids a lot that the main reason to write is to see what you think. And this doesn't change at all when you're on the other side of the big desk, right? Because as teachers, we spend a lot of time doing, and we all know that reflection is incredibly important, but when do we actually have time to do that? I'm sure that some of us journal. I know that journaling was always a goal of mine, but it was really hard for me to sit down and actually write about the practice I was doing in a journal. And once I did that, I rarely came back to it. It was pretty much a one-directional, better. And then I completely forgot about it. But if I do that onto a blog, occasionally an email pops up that says, so-and-so commented on your blog, and I read the comment, and I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about. And I go back and I read the blog post, and I go, oh, wow, interesting, I wrote that, huh. And I get to go back to that moment and think about what I was thinking then, and it actually becomes alive for me again. So then my practice becomes even connected to itself. And that's what always ends up surprising me, is how much other people can help me just remember, revisit, reevaluate what I'm doing. And that's one of the big benefits that I've seen as a connected educator so far. There's some things that I wanted to cover really quickly about blogging and writing because I think they're really important. You don't know what your readers like, period. So when you're blogging, as long as you have a focus to your blog, like this is my tech integration blog, and I'm going to write mostly about tech integration there. Other than that, I really try not to worry about what my readers are going to want. Because frankly, one of my most popular posts is called Why Digital Handwriting Matters. And it's written using a live scribe pen. It's hardly legible. It's about, maybe 50 words long. And it has over 3,000 views. Why? I don't know. Maybe the title is compelling. But, you're just not going to know what people are going to like. So you just write and you put yourself out there for an audience, and your audience will find you. If you participate in the community, the people who are interested in what you're doing will find you. Write about specific things that actually happen. Okay, I tell this to everybody, right? Don't write about anything in theory, because unless you're big on theory and you want to put that right before you write about the thing that actually happened, because that's what people want to read about. They want to know, how did this work in your class on that day? What did the kids say? What was the expression on their face? What was going on in the room? How did it feel? Like, tell us the specifics. And I know this is true because the more specific my posts are, the more people interact with them. And the more they can actually see myself in them. Blogs are imperfect. It's all good. It's all good. Now, this is from the point of view of an English teacher who misspells things on the boards all the time. And they can hardly read my handwriting. So I've been making mistakes in front of small groups of people for a long time. And I think at this point in my career, I'm ready to make mistakes in front of a large group of people. And what I've found is that when someone points out a mistake that I've made, they generally find a way to do it that isn't in front of everybody. And they say, oh, by the way, in the middle of this post it says so-and-so instead of such and so. Oh, thanks. And as a blog reader, I find I do the same thing. When I see someone's got something not quite right in their blog, I let them know in a way that's private so they can fix it. But it's not really about being right or being perfect. It's just about, oh, you were going fast. Thank you so much for taking the time to actually write this. Because it does take time. And once you're doing the writing, you really recognize that, this is an act of time and ego, not like I have a giant ego, but I'm risking my ego by putting this out there. And you really form community by interacting with others in a caring way. Share your story from the heart is really everything, because we're all out there every day trying to do the best job we can as a teacher, and how are other people going to know if what you're doing is worth following or not unless you're actually, unless you're actually, being as honest as you can in that blog. And again, this is one of the ones where every time I've written about something on my blog that I think, I don't know if I really want to go here, the response is amazing, right? So every time I do that risk, it gets repaid. Now, blogging can be addictive in some ways. And one of the things I've had to be careful, so far I've managed to limit myself to 2 blogs, although I've come up with ideas for about 20. Like, oh, this is great, this is my tech integration blog, and then I'm gonna have this blog over here that's about high engagement teaching, because some of the stuff I'm doing here, I'm not sure if my tech integration crowd is gonna like. And then I think, oh, I should have another blog for this, this, and this, and then it's just more blogs I can't keep up with. How often should you blog? As often as you feel like you have something to say, and more often than you have time for. It is, sometimes I can hit 2 or 3 posts in a week, and sometimes it's a month between posts. And, I try not to beat myself up about it because that doesn't get any more writing done. But once I came up with another concept, which was bethedistraction.org, because even though I work with 9th graders, I've found that using a wide array of high engagement teaching strategies is amazing. And I've been looking more into project-based learning and like Genius Hour kind of things, and just caring for the whole student. It's kind of my super shameless progressive ed blog, right? With puppets. And I wasn't sure that the tech integration crowd would really appreciate that. You put puppets out there, people, they judge you one way or the other. So far it's worked out pretty well, I guess. But so I want to talk a little bit about blogging just at the beginning here, because when I talk about building a personal learning network, my blog is one of the easiest ways for people to see who I am, what I think, and what I do. And one of the keys to a personal learning network is being of value to other people, because people interact with you when you're doing something valuable to them. Sharing your experience can be very valuable to other teachers. So when I'm blogging mainly for my own reflection, but at the same time I'm doing it with the knowledge that I'm putting it on a platform that others have access to, that they can see and use. I think the next slide might define PLN, but we'll define it now. PLN is one of those terms that I heard bandied about a lot, and when I went to the Ed.D conference last year, I said, okay, I have to go to a session with PLN in the title, so somebody will tell me what it means. It stands for Personal Learning Network, and it really operates more on the level of personal than anything else. It's a very, and I'll talk about this more in a second, but it's a very convenient kind of frame for thinking about the way you interact online. What I've done over the past year is I've worked in a very focused way to develop a Twitter profile that engages with as many teachers as I can. And what I want to talk about a little bit now is some of the things I've done in pursuit of that. And what it's resulted in is a pretty fast-growing network. I mean, numbers are ridiculous. Don't get hung up on numbers, and you'll be obsessed with numbers. To that end, like last month I had 1,400 followers. This month I have 1,600 followers, and I haven't really done anything different to like get more followers in the meantime. I've just continued doing what I do, and we'll talk about it later. And the main thing I do is I chat relentlessly. The Twitter chat is an amazing thing, and I just can't stay away from them. We'll talk more about that soon. But I've also, over here, is the number of tweets I've sent out. Now, what amazes me is when I compare this number to like the number attached to my Gmail account with the number of total messages in it, that number of total messages is somewhere around 14,000, and I've had that Gmail account since Gmail started. My number of total tweets as of Thursday was 11,426. My wife has issue with this. It's with good cause. You know, there's a work-life balance thing that don't have time for that in this presentation. So a personal learning network, as I mentioned earlier, is more of a how than a what. I actually use the idea of a personal learning network with my freshmen to talk about digital citizenship, because it's a way of approaching the internet. Sometimes you go to the internet because you want to play Words with Friends. Great. Nothing against Words with Friends, no matter how crazy it makes me. But sometimes you approach the internet because you want to figure out what you're going to do with the Julius Caesar lesson that's in 25 minutes. Not that I would ever do that. Because sometimes people do that. And if you put yourself in a situation like that, it's really good if you've developed an amazing resource that can respond that quickly. We've got some tips on that. So the personal learning network is more of a how than a what, and it focuses on the idea that there are people on the other end of everything you do online. And there are people that respond really well to response and interaction. And building a personal learning network is about creating a resource for you that you can use in a variety of ways. My personal learning network is founded on Twitter. That is the main hub, and it's one of the most common hubs. There are other ways to do it, but Twitter is the one that I've seen as the most robust. Quick survey. Who in the room does not have a Twitter account? Okay, great. Go to twitter.com. No, I'm not serious. I'm serious. Go to twitter.com. Well, wait. Those of you in the room with a Twitter account, I'm recruiting you. So it's only about a 5-step process to register for Twitter. Doing it right now will give you access to all of the cool Twitter stuff that's happening right now in this conference. Like this session, right now, live on Twitter. No, I'm serious. Video, whatever. So, yeah, waving at Twitter, right? They're waving back, I swear. So when you set up a Twitter account, one of the best things that I didn't know when I set up my account, Learning's Living, is that short names are much cooler than long names. Much, much cooler, because you can fit more of them in a message. Somebody wants to include me in a group message, they've just given up like 20 characters. Yes? Excellent. Securities. I don't know why they don't address the site. Maybe.
I found Chrome wasn't working.
Chrome wasn't letting you do it?
I went to get on Firefox.
It's not happening.
It's not happening. Is it giving you the security message, or is there a network issue?
Not the iPad is the password is not.
With the iPad, you have to first go to.
Wouldn't let me on with the, it's an old hard.
It wouldn't let you on with the Kindle? Okay.
So you go to.
Okay, some of us are able to make it there. Hmm? Okay, so if you, I don't know, I think you just have to. Yeah, so as you're going, it'll run you through a couple, follow 5 people, follow 5 whatever, and you can just almost click on anything that appeals to you on those, because you can always eliminate them later, but it just wants you to auto-follow some people. If it gives you an option to follow individual people, I've put 5 addresses up here, people I like a lot. But there's a bunch of other people you could also follow, like another Schwab. Yeah, we were getting that security message over there. I'm not, I don't know what their trust issue is. Right. Is it working on?
Oh, that side, okay.
Yeah, you can type, you should be able to type in any of those. Mine is Learning's Living. Misguided idea that this whole sentence was really cool.
Are those recommendations all that text?
Yeah, let's see. Cheryl is a 11th and 12th grade English teacher who focuses on flipped class instruction. Diane Main is the tech person here. Teacher Cast is Jeff Bradbury. He runs a giant website in New Jersey that has a bunch of different teacher blogs attached to it, and he broadcasts stuff all the time and is going to turn it into a completely connected world with full video on every chat. He's changing everything. And he spends like an hour and a half in traffic every day. I don't know how he does that.
Diane Main.
Yeah.
GGIN.
GGIN? Oh, thank you. I'm not sure if I should. I'm not sure if I should blame Keynote because it doesn't have Twitter integration with autosuggest there, or Twitter's autosuggest because that's the only reason I don't know people's address, right? Inst Tech Talk is instructional tech talk. That's Jeff Herb. He's in Michigan. He has a really great podcast about tech integration, and he has weekly tech challenges, which are really accessible. Like this week, learn this, and here's the steps to doing it. Question? No? Okay. And Edutopia, they're Edutopia. Yeah, just Edutopia, right. If you want to keep track of what they're doing with their Wookiee money, you know, follow Edutopia. And a couple, it looks like people are getting pretty much on there. A couple words just to add about Twitter in general is if you want to figure out what you should tweet, the best way to do it is watch what people tweet. It's actually the same principles that we use for rhetoric, right? If you want to understand a medium, read the medium, watch the medium, look at how the medium works, and then interact in that medium. And one of the things that I've found is that kindness is much greater than wit. And I think part of this is because kindness translates really easily, right? We don't need like kindness marks to denote sarcasm, you know, or anything like that. It's just being nice and kind and supportive is well received all the time. Whereas if you're trying to be witty, a lot of times people will take offense thinking you're being mean to them because they can't tell that you're smiling on your end. Or they think maybe you're smiling and you're mean. Another thing is you want to keep your, well, there's a lot of different approaches to this. I try by and large to keep my professional and casual social media separate. So I have my teacher account that's very visible, and there are kids who follow my teacher account and they say, Dr. Patterson, why don't you follow me back? And I say, because you're not a teacher. Oh. And then eventually they go, Dr. Patterson, your Twitter feed is really overwhelming and really boring. That's because you're not a teacher. Oh, there's nothing there for them. I used to be really freaked out. Oh no, what if the kids find my social media profile? And no. Trust that they'll find your social media profile, but make it so overwhelming and dull that they have no interest in it at all. You know, so I have a bunch of really cute dogs, and rarely do the dogs make it to the social media profile, right? Because they don't have any business there. Llamas, that's another story. But largely, I try to keep my Twitter feed specifically teacher-related, because getting a focused Twitter feed can actually allow you to do some really cool things with different curation platforms. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The difference, so I talked a little bit about this earlier. There's a lot of amazing teachers on Twitter. If you're on Twitter and you just search for Twitter for Teachers, you will come up with presentations, slide decks, etc., of people talking specifically about how to use Twitter for teachers. When you're tweeting something out, if you want to interact with this group of teachers on Twitter, ask yourself, is this of use to anyone else? If not, you know, skip it. But it may well be, so, but, you know, as I say here, your food is of no use to me. And, you know, I really get down on the food tweets. I don't know. And I'm sure I've tweeted about my food, right? But we'll use that as a stand-in example for everything else that could be wrong. So, the power of the PLN is the people that you connect with. And I found once I started sharing about the tools I was working with, the things I was exploring, I found an incredibly responsive community who wanted to talk to me, which was really amazing. That was kind of the game changer. I think one of the, well, I went to the Ed camp in, what was the school? Where did we go? It's north of here. And if Carl was in here.
San Mateo, somewhere there.
Yeah, it was somewhere in San Mateo. But, and I met a number of people at that event that I then found to be very responsive on Twitter. And one of the groups was Live Binders. And I want to go to them. Oh, sorry. Okay, good. So sending direct messages to people about things you have actual questions about is amazing on Twitter because generally they respond pretty quickly. One of the easiest ways to interact, especially when you're starting on Twitter, is when you see a good idea, you simply retweet it, which just sends it out to people who are following you, even if no one's following you. Like if you have one follower, go ahead and retweet anyway, because you know it can be visible to more than just that. Let's go back a couple slides. I want to show you really quickly. This is a tweet, and it's got some significant critical parts. There's these addresses that start with the @ sign. Those are all addresses. So this is a person, this is a person, and this is a person. There's the edcampwikispaces.com link here, which is just a hyperlink to a website. And then there's a hashtag, and here it's #, EdCamp. And we're going to talk more about hashtags in a little bit. Preview, they're magic. Below the tweet, it gives you the option to view the conversation. If you click on that, you'll see what tweets this tweet was in response to. You can kind of follow it back, which is really fun, especially when you see something that you don't understand at all. And then you're just like, okay, how did this come about? You can see what the conversation was. There's reply, where you can, if you want to reply to the individual or everybody on this message. There's retweet, which I just mentioned, which basically just says, okay, this message that came into my inbox, that's really cool. I'm going to put it over here in the outbox so everybody who follows me can see it also. There's favorite, which is just a way to save it to your list of favorites. And as you become a more advanced Twitter user, there's things your favorite list can do for you that are pretty cool. And over here, I've got the option of buffer. Now, Buffer is a program or an app that basically allows you to stack stuff into your outbox, and it sends it out when the people who follow you are most likely to see it, which is really great for me because sometimes it's incredibly late at night when I'm on Twitter, and if I sit there and retweet, it'll just be like this gang of 20 tweets hanging out at 11:30 at night, which gets me an amazing group of Australian followers. Seriously. Like I got to the point where it was like, oh, it's time to go to bed, Australia's talking to me. But Buffer makes it so I can stack those 20 tweets there, and it sends them out in the middle of the next day, or the day following that. This does have the unintended consequence of making it look like I am always on Twitter. The good news about that is I have some sort of lame excuse I can tell people about why it looks like I'm always on Twitter. Wink, wink, wink. Hashtag always on Twitter. Retweeting is a great way to participate in the community because other people can see that you're supporting what they're doing. Like, and when you send out a message, whether it's your blog post or whether it's a website you found, and somebody else retweets it, there's this great little spark of like, oh cool, somebody else agrees and likes what I did. You know, the work I'm doing is being repeated out there. That's neat. One of the really amazing things I've found on Twitter though is once you have people that kind of see what you're doing, people will contact you and say, hey, I'm doing X, would you be interested in this? I'm putting this together, what do you think? And one of the first groups that invited me to any kind of collaboration was Clacko.com, which is a really interesting site that has some similar factors to LiveBinders, but it's also slightly different. So I'll show you them really quick as soon as I can remember how. there have been so many other invitations to collaborate that have come my way that I can't even begin to go into all of them. One of the most exciting, though, is that this summer I'm going to have the opportunity to present with someone that I didn't even know before this year, and we're going to be co-presenting about flipped learning instruction on aircraft carrier. Why? Because I got on Twitter. It's Cheryl, by the way, in the back. When I talked about Cheryl, who teaches 11th and 12th grade flipped class English, that's her. She snuck in. So I find that I use my PLN to collaborate a lot. Sometimes these are long-term collaborations. Sometimes these are short-term collaborations. Sometimes they're just like, oh, I need a bunch of people to answer this question, and I can send it out, and sometimes they'll answer the question. And sometimes they'll totally ignore it, and I'll think, wow, I need a better question. An answer. There was, probably 2 or 3 times a week I'll respond to some random survey that's like, how are you using Twitter for your personal learning network? Well, I'll tell you. It won't take that long. And it's easy. And what's great is that person now has the data that they're using for, I think the last one I answered was for someone's master's in Ed project, right? So you bet I'll help you out with that. It's really simple. Some simple things to help you have a really good personal learning network. Please and thank you. Brief thanks for retweets builds community. If somebody sends out something you did and you notice it, you can just hit reply. Thanks for I've seen it as short as TY for the RT, right? It still gets the job done. It says, wow, I appreciate the fact that you're sharing my ideas, or that you liked what I liked. Follow widely and unfollow freely. I totally believe in this. I follow, especially at the beginning, I followed just about everybody I could find that was even remotely interesting, and the first time I went, I unfollowed them, right? You don't have to suffer things you don't want in your Twitter feed at all. And those triggers are all different for all of us. As people follow me, when I'm trying to figure out if I follow them back or not, I use the profile description. So your Twitter profile description, include the word teacher in it, and I'll follow you back. It's that simple, because I want a Twitter feed that is full of teachers, because I'm a teacher and I'm looking for ideas. I don't follow heavy tweeters, but I am a heavy tweeter. Yeah, and that has to do everything with what I'm trying to do with my Twitter feed. I push it out to a number of different news aggregation sources that bring together a bunch of different stories. And if I take somebody else who does that also, I can end up with a lot of redundant material. So sometimes I go, okay, well, I'm not going to follow this person anymore, but I can keep track of them this way, or this way.
What do you got to explain about the llamas?
It's a running gag. Hopefully I'll get to the end of the thing. Hashtags are magic. It's more complicated than that, but it doesn't really matter, because I don't understand it. They may as well be magic. But the hashtag is neat because it's an organizational label. It works because it's a unique string of characters. Because in the English language, we don't use this much. In fact, most of us don't know how to say it, right? That's a pound symbol. You'll hear from someone say hashtag, but really it's a pound. Followed by whatever, the string is. If you search the hashtag #EduAwesome, you'll always find really great ideas, because there's a large community of people who, when they see something really cool, and they're like, oh, instead of saying, oh, which is really hard to understand on Twitter, they hashtag it #EduAwesome. And in addition to being a search organizer, it can also be a really great way to provide self-critical commentary, especially if you make them really, really long. If you search #shenanigans, you can always find something very strange where people are using incredibly long hashtags to be funny and comment on things. It's difficult because you can't put any spaces in a hashtag. So if you have a hashtag that's something like, I hate really long hashtags, and you capitalize the letters as you go at the beginning of the words, it'll make it easier for people to read them. But they do kind of a dual function. And as a poet, I love language that works conspicuously in more than one direction. It organizes, but also comments on. The other day I used the hashtag can't flip this as I was talking to one of the people online about some of the aspects of teaching. Specifically, he was talking about how it seems like when he really makes a difference is when he runs into students, in the hallway or on the way to the water fountain. And, well, yeah, if you're gonna look at flipped instruction, we can't necessarily flip that moment. But maybe it went into a conversation that said, well, maybe we can find ways to create more of those moments by reorganizing the other ones. I'm sure you still have questions about hashtags. That's okay. This part could go over your head, and that's okay. Because I'm still a little confused about this, and it's a little overwhelming. But when I started on Twitter, what I did, and it's so funny, I found a post-it yesterday that said, figure out RSS feeds in education and stalk Vicki Davis. Now, Vicki Davis has the Twitter handle Cool Cat Teacher, and she is a really great Twitter user, an amazing blogger, and super organized social media campaign. So for a while I just said, okay, anything she's doing, I'm going to try to figure out what that is and learn from it and do that. And that led me to looking at these tools, Paper.ly, Scoop It, Newsmix, which if you do a search on them, about half the people will say they are spam drivers. Because they kick out a lot of auto emails and auto notifications. But if you focus them really well, they can take an overwhelming Twitter stream and turn it into a readable newsletter. And they look really nice. So one of the things that I've done with my feed is I work with these platforms to organize the work I'm doing, but also to try to participate in the community. So I've got a EdTech News Daily that comes out of Paper.ly, and a your Apple Distinguished Educator News on Newsmix, and I can't remember what the Scoop It thing's called. I think I need to check into that and update it. But each of these, when I go back and I check on them, people have been there and they're doing stuff, and it's a way to organize the material and make it usable to me, but it also makes it somewhat useful to other people. But that feeds, basically my Twitter stream dumps directly into these programs, which turn it into a newsletter, which is part of the reason I try to keep the food tweets out of my Twitter stream, because I don't need your dinner in my newsletter. Most of the people, and this might not be right, I have no way to verify this. Most of the people in my PLN have followed me after talking with me in a chat. Once I started participating in Twitter chats, the number of people who followed me went way up. Why? Because I was interacting directly with other people. And they were like, oh yeah, you like what I said. Excellent. I'm going to pay more attention to you. It's really simple psychology, actually. And Twitter chats initially can be really overwhelming, because there can be hundreds of messages that go by in that hour. But I've found that also by kind of lurking in a chat, just hanging out and watching it happen, and then participating actively in the chat, you can really get invested in the community, get to know people, and end up with a very responsive PLN. Participating in chats outside your field is tricky, but really interesting. As I've done Twitter chat, there have been a number of times where actually I'll finish a really great education chat, and then I've got 20 minutes to kill, so I'm like, oh, I wonder what other chats are happening. T-chat, I wonder what that's about. Is that about teachers? And I spend a lot of time there, and then I figure out it's about talent. These are HR people. Okay, this is interesting, and they're talking about leadership. Hey, I know about leadership. Okay, we'll talk. And then we end up having coffee together. Weird, but interesting. So I got to meet people, and it expanded my personal learning network, and now I know HR people, which is sometimes useful and interesting, and I can't see how else would have happened. The simplest way to participate in a chat is to retweet something and just put an affirmative message right in front of it, like yes or I agree. doesn't really, somebody else has already taken the risk of expressing this idea, and you can just kind of tag on and go, yeah, which is really fun, because if you get enough people going, yeah, then suddenly you realize everybody in the chat thinks that is a really good idea, and that's kind of a powerful moment of community building. There are so many great Twitter chats. I've just put a couple up here, and I'm sure there's important ones that I'm missing. NT chat is a chat that focuses on new teachers and support for new teachers. And Lisa at Teaching with Soul, there's no I in Teaching with Soul. She's making the same mistakes I am, right? Writing an entire sentence for a name. She is the organizer of that chat. Sat chat happens Saturday morning. I'll give these in Pacific time, right? There's a 5:30 a.m. East Coast one and a 7:30 a.m. West Coast one. I could tell I was really addicted to chatting when I was getting up, so I could hit them both. Really amazing community though. It's focused on administrators, and I'm not necessarily an administrator completely. Small school, we have a lot of flexible roles, but I found that discussion there to be really amazing and incredibly responsive. And for example, when Hurricane Sandy hit, the East Coast sat chat of administrators was an amazing window into the role schools play in communities during disasters. Ed chat is kind of the staple of education chats. It happens twice on Tuesday, once earlier in the morning, once later in the afternoon. I don't know the times exactly because I keep having to teach during them. But that's a really, really great one. And if you're looking for people to follow on Twitter, if you search #EdChat and just follow the people that are using that hashtag, you're going to find quality people. And if not, unfollow them, right? No big deal. Patui it used to be Palo Alto Tech Using Educators, but now it is Pedagogy and Technology Tuesday. And that's actually a chat that I started in November. Which has been an amazing community builder. And we really try to focus on just different aspects of integrating tech from the idea that pedagogy leads tech integration. California Educators chat, this one is really new and hot. I mean, there are just so many people on that chat, and I'm looking ahead at the schedule. They're gonna have people from the State Board of Education on the chat. I mean, there's just so many great things that I think there's, Cheryl, do you know how many people are in that California chat group? I know that every time they send out an email, it's like
8 moderators, but there's a couple hundred people.
Yeah. So, and if you think about it, like 8 moderators, there's 8 people making this chat run. And they do an amazing job. And then flip class, that's Mondays, right? You got a time on that? 5? So at 5 on Mondays, the flip class chat is, works through different ideas of implementing flipped educational pedagogies in the classroom. I haven't talked about KidBlog yet. Any administrators in the room? Excellent. For administrators, a PLN, or Personal Learning Network, can be really important and really fruitful, because oftentimes where teachers may have the opportunity to build community within their building, administrators, that pool is much smaller. So if you're looking for other administrators to talk to reflect with, to network with, Twitter can be an amazing resource for that. And it's a great way to find resources that you can bring to your staff and see how they've worked in other places, and read another administrator's blog post about how they use the unconference model to run a meeting, for example, and to really get the benefit of other administrators' experience. Yes, finally made it to the long llama, duck joke, right? There's a game called Llama Llama Duck. I actually have llamas out in Yucca Valley, so I work llamas into just about everything because I love my llamas and don't get to spend enough time with them. And that's our Patui duck. He's spitting because we are spitting distance from Silicon Valley. Yeah. That's great. Overall, I would say I've got Kid Blog up here because when I teach digital citizenship from a personal learning network model, I do not put my students on Twitter because Twitter is wide open. Kid Blog allows you to start with a walled garden model, so you have total control over who sees their posts, even within the class, and you can respond in a private comment or a public comment, and you can gradually, gradual release of responsibility as they become more well-versed in how to interact appropriately online. You can make their work more and more public. So all of this works really well from another perspective, and that being kind of a Kid Blog approach. If you're saying, I want to keep them more secluded than that, we don't necessarily want to put them out there and make all those mistakes. No, that's really a lot of work for everybody. Starting them and having them practice in a smaller community and then allowing them to build their community as they go. We've only got 5 minutes, and I wanted more time than this for questions because I've just been talking nonstop, which is really weird for me. Do we have questions?
So,
Yeah.
Kid Blog, I'm sorry, I don't know the whole, but, when you do have that control to open it up a little bit more, and could you open it up?
You can open it wide open. Like, my freshmen were essentially just talking to themselves until about the time Hurricane Sandy hit, and then I had them do some writing about, what was going on the East Coast and disaster preparedness, and at the same time I taught them how to, use tags to identify their messages, and a little bit about search engine optimization, which the long and short of that is write a good article and give it a title that's descriptive. But they did that, and we made those public, and there was a little map that shows you where the viewers are from, and we've got at least one person from Jakarta who's read a bunch of the blog posts, and the kids were all just like, why are they reading our posts? I'm like, well, calm down, you have to be angry about it. They're just, you tagged it with Hurricane Sandy. Hurricane Sandy is in the news. They did a search and they found you, so they're reading our stuff. Yeah, oh, I gotta fix something. Oh, okay, great. So they, that whole audience beyond me is really useful for a writing teacher because then it's not Dr. Patterson being picky. It's like, no, your work really just needs to make sense. Come on. Other questions?
I
Yes.
still have the work-life balance question. I think you alluded to that, but then.
Yeah, work-life balance is, I'm like the worst person in the world for this because while I have a bunch of allowance in Yucca Valley, I have a job up here and I spend a ridiculous time away from my wife. So I indulge myself on this a lot. But there are a lot of educators who are on Twitter a lot, and they really just schedule it a little bit in the morning and a little bit in the evening, and it's not something you have to, be on all of the time at all. And by building a resource that's actually available to you, what I've found is I can save time that I used to spend trying to find things that would work because I've built this resource of people, and then I can ask them, hey, does this work? And they're like, no, don't try that. Do it this way. But at the same time, I've really been impressed with how many of the teachers I interact with online have said things like, my wife has talked to me about how much time I'm spending online, I need to pull back from this a little bit. It's like, oh, okay, no problem. So it's kind of part of the open conversation that, I think a lot of people are working through and struggling with also. Questions? Well, yes?
Do you eventually, expose Twitter to your students? Like, do you go through people on Twitter, or do you stay?
I show them it. Part of my modeling being a connected educator is they see that I'm on Twitter. I share with them messages from people we interact with on Twitter. I don't put my students on Twitter. They can get there on there. I also don't put them on Facebook. We don't do anything on Facebook. I've got the learning management system Schoology that allows me to build groups, so I'll use that. But I'm pretty cautious about what I do with social media with students. Early on, I was really innovative with MySpace, and that ended up with a lot of issues at the school I was at. So since then, I've been really kind of cautious about, okay, you can do this, but I've seen a really good model of setting up a class account on Twitter and having students tweet from a class account, and the teacher controls the login information for that. And I think that's a really good way to do it, even with students as young as like 2nd grade, because you've got that, knowledgeable teacher as a gateway. Sorry about that. Other questions? Thank you so much. It was great to have you here today. As you're learning for the rest of the day, use your Twitter account to share what you're learning. Use the hashtag SVQ13. So if you're in a great session and you want to share about it, you can say, another Schwab is running a great session. I'm loving it. Hashtag SVQ13.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Hi. With the hashtag, let's say it's like a corporation and they put Apple, hashtag Apple, and is it like they're trying to own that particular thing to kind of monitor, that their posts? Or
Right.
Do they really want? Let's say, but someone's commenting on a piece of fruit, Apple.
Right. Well,
So do you see what I'm saying? How do how do those hashtags? Like a domain name has a registered.
You'll find that you'll see variations where people who are trying to get who are using hashtags for data collection will try to make those hashtags as unique as possible so there isn't as much noise on them.
Okay.
Like my Palo Alto tech using educators, right? Patui, I did a bunch of searches, and the only time that shows up is in the middle of some Spanish. Right? It's not very prominent.
Okay.
So
you try to choose something that's unique, but eventually it just becomes so many, right? That
Right.
keep making it even
well,
more.
and then there's in chats themselves, as hashtags become popular, advertisers will actually spam at the hashtag. So in that Saturday morning Twitter chat, it's not uncommon for us to switch to SatChat WC, which is not Water Closet for the West Coast, halfway through the chat because
someone's trying to come
there's a bunch of spam that is showing up.
Okay. And then when you were talking about the chat, is the chat just basically tweets that are you're just on at that time? You're just tweeting.
Right, you're just tweeting at that
It's not
time.
like there's a special chat area, right?
No, but there's a website called Tweet Chat, which automates some of it and makes it really easy, where you just tell it the hashtag you want to follow, and all the messages you put into that window, it will automatically label with that hashtag.
But otherwise, you could just be in your Twitter account
Yeah.
and just commenting and reading.
Right, you just search by the hashtag and make sure you type it in.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
About hashtags. Do you make it up? Do you make them up? Or
You
are
certainly
there
can.
a list out there?
There's, if you search educational hashtags on Twitter, you can find all these lists of
Right.
hashtags that are being used.
Right.
If you're starting a group
Right.
and you want to create a chat that's going to focus, have one singular focus, then you make up a hashtag. And
Okay.
you try to get people to use that hashtag in order to organize the ideas around that focus.
Okay. So there's a program out there that checks for the uniqueness of the hashtag.
Generally, I
Really general.
just search it on Twitter. If I say, okay, are people using Sam is cool? I'm going to search, hashtag Sam is cool. Oh, okay, a bunch of people are using that. I don't want to use that. It's a little confusing. I'm sure there are more, but.
All right. Thank you.
Like yours.
We just pressured George Carlos into showing up.
Really?
He's gonna be here soon.
Really? No way.
He was in San Jose. He said
Really?
he said he's coming here.
No. I'm gonna, I got the puppet.
He what?
I got the puppet. That's my puppet.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't see that. Sherry just said it, but she's like, "Where's the puppet? Sam can't present without puppets."
Well, it made it into the slide, but.
I saw the llamas. Where are you going next?
I have no idea. I planned. You're session 3, right?
I have a random question for you.
You bet.
I was interested about 6 months ago in starting a blog, and everything I was seeing online cost money. It was like $30 to get going, or changing the formatting, $45, or like the blog that you use.
I use Blogger.
blogger.
And it's free. 'Cause
And because I can do it, I'm going to show you what's going on. So, now I am using an Apple TV to show you what I'm doing so you guys can see.